Yeah, so basically it's just what a wonderful time of year. I think there's so much magic in the air as we're kind of saying goodbye to the winter months and we're letting in some of that spring energy and that spring air. And I think more than ever this year we all really need to be welcoming this spring in. I think it just feels like such a huge blessing. And I don't know if anybody picked up the invitation that I sent earlier to maybe pick a few bits of spring from their surrounding area. Has anybody got any bits of spring with them? What have you got there, Shona? A daffodil, fabulous. Brilliant. What's that you've got there, Liz? Liz Byfield?
Forsythia and buds of blackthorn.
Fabulous.
Oh, I like blackthorn. I made an Easter tree and I put well, it's not Easter because I don't celebrate Easter, but it's a spring tree. And I've got birds and eggs and things like that on it.
Fabulous. What have you got there, Rihanna?
It's a stick of dogwood that I kind of made into a little circlet.
Fabulous. Gorgeous. What have you got there, Michael? Did you have something?
I've got some ivy here. I didn't realise we had to grab green stuff, so I ran outside and grabbed it. I really pulled the whole head down, but I've brought this for you anyway.
So that gives us the opportunity to say goodbye to the winter.
Indeed.
What have you got there, Mog? Did you have something, Mog? No, you didn't. I thought I saw something.
I did have something. Sorry, I did, but I cheated because I already had some daffodils in here, and I didn't get out. I did get out today, but I didn't see your message till late, so
Don't worry. Don't worry.
I got something.
Well, what I've brought is I've got some willow. So in the last, it's trying to practice stories in a house full of children and building work and chaos has been a nightmare actually over winter. And in the last 3 days, because we've had all this glorious spring sunshine, I've been able to go and sit on the top of our common on this fallen down willow tree with beautiful views and kind of just absorb myself in the landscape that these stories have come from and absorb myself in spring that we're celebrating. So yes, this is a little bit of that tree that I brought with me this afternoon after my nice trip. So I'm so excited and delighted to be welcoming Michael Harvey to tell us a story today. I started my storytelling journey with Michael. First of all, I did a week-long storytelling course at Bleddfa, which is just down the road from us. And then I did a professional storytellers course a few weeks later with Michael. And he's he's incredible storyteller.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and I'm so impressed that you've got such an amazing looking audience to tell to. So I'm going to crack on with a bit of a story, but before I do, I'd like to ask you all a question, and it's to do with youth. How would we feel if the spirit of youth was imprisoned? Because in this story it is. In this story, the spirit of youth, which in Welsh is Mabon, the son of Modron. Modron is like a kind of mother goddess. Her son is Mabon, and he's in prison. And he's been in prison since pretty much time began. He was stolen from his mother's side when he was 2 nights old. So what does the world look like when Mabon, the spirit of youth, is in prison and no one knows where he is? Pop your answer in the chat, please. Old. In the mist. Great. Yes, dark, dull. Yeah, we would be all those things, like a Radio 4 play. Please, God, not that bad. But yes. Winter. Parliament. Yeah, it would be rubbish, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, stony. Wow, indeed. So, this is the world without youth. It is, and I quote, old, in the mist, dark, dull, grey, like a Radio 4 play, winter, shabby, serious, Parliament, frustrated, stony, lonely, lost, similar to how the kids have suffered due to COVID restrictions. That's how rubbish it is. Now, I've got a question for you, and it's a simple one, and it's got a yes or no. Oh, boring. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah. It's got a simple yes or no question. Are we going to free Mabon or not? If it's yes, give me a wave. Let's get him out of jail. Right. Mabon, he's been stolen from his mother's side when he was 2 nights old, and he's hidden away and no one knows where he is. And the world is all those things that we've just listed. It's a disaster, so we need to get him out. There's a problem. We don't know where he is. Now, I need to do a bit of a backstory here, because this story about Mabon is part of a much bigger story called Culhwch and Olwen. And in Culhwch and Olwen, there's a boy called Culhwch. He starts off as a lad. When he's 8 years old, he is fostered. This was the custom amongst noble families at the time. Away he went to another family. Years passed. Then a message comes that he needs to go home. By this time, he is not quite adult. He's not quite a young man. He's still a lad. He walks into the great hall of his father's home, and there's a fire. In the light of the fire, there's a woman he's never seen before. And beside the woman he's never seen before is a young, awkward-looking girl about the same age as him. And the woman smiles and says, "So sorry to give you the news that your mother's dead. But luckily for you, I'm your new mother. I'm your stepmother. And I have even better news. And it is that my daughter will be your wife." So Culhwch and the poor awkward girl stare at each other for a nanosecond, and he looks away and he turns to the woman and says, "I will not marry your daughter." And she looks at him and she says, "Really? If you refuse my daughter, you refuse all women. And if you don't change your mind now, I'm going to curse you." Okay, it's the curse then. And she drew up this curse from God knows what horrible place. She summoned it and then she poured it into his body. And as this curse whirled around him, he knew there was no escape. It wrapped itself around his body. It went into his lungs. It found its liver and his kidneys, and it squeezed and it wrenched every part of his body. He was screaming in agony, and his stepmother and the girl drifted out of the hall, and he was left there moaning and groaning on the floor. And this was the curse. You will have no woman in your arms unless that woman is Olwen, the daughter of Ysbyddaden Ben Cawr, the chief of all giants. And the love curse would keep him looking until he found her. Now, a few minutes later, his father came in and found his son in a heap on the floor, dusted him down, picked him up, sat him on a bench, and they had a chat. And at the end of the chat, Culhwch's father said to him, "Listen to me. What you have to remember is who you are. And who are you? On your mother's side, you are a cousin to King Arthur. So what you have to do is you have to go to King Arthur and you have to get him to help you. If he can't help you, nobody can." So off he goes to see King Arthur. To cut a long story short, Arthur likes him. And they're all sent off to Ysbyddaden Ben Cawr in a massive, great big castle. And there, Ysbyddaden Ben Cawr gives Culhwch impossible tasks. Now, in this kind of story, you go to see the giant in order to marry the giant's daughter, and you usually get 1, 2, 3 tasks, and they're usually pretty hard. We're not talking about 3 tasks here. We're talking about 39. 39 impossible tasks, each one more impossible than the next. and we're going to do one of them. And that one is freeing Mabon. Now, Mabon has been in prison since he was 2 nights old, stolen from his mother's side, in some prison somewhere, and no one knows where he is. So King Arthur, he calls 4 of his bravest and most clever warriors. First one is Kai. Kai is a great warrior. His body gives off such heat that when he sits on a mountaintop that's covered in snow, all around him for 100 yards is fresh green grass because it's melted. Kai is a great warrior. He can fight and kill faster than anyone else, and the heat of his body is so great that on a cold winter's night, all his friends can huddle around him and keep warm. The heat of his body is so great that if he goes underneath the water of a river or the sea, he can hold his breath for 9 days and 9 nights. And if he goes down under the water holding a piece of iron in his hand, that piece of iron for a hand's breadth below and above where he holds it, when he comes out will be bone dry because of the heat of his body. Then there was Bedwyr. Bedwyr was an amazing warrior. What you need to know about him is he only had 1 hand. He only had 1 hand, but he could fight and kill quicker than 3 men with 2 hands could. And Arthur also picked Gurhir Gwalstad who could speak every language in the world, including the languages of the animals. And he also chose Cynddylig Cyfarwydd, a man who could find the path to anywhere you wanted to go in the world, including places he himself had never been. So off they went to search for Mabon. Now, Arthur had gave them a bit of a hint. He says, look, don't ask any human beings, right? I'm pretty old, says King Arthur, and I know many old people, but even the oldest person I know has got no memory of Mabon, so don't ask the people. You must ask beings that are older and wiser than us. And if you asked my opinion, I would send you to the oldest animal I know, and that's the blackbird, Mwyalch Cilgwri. So off they go to Cilgwri, the 4 of them. They search and they search and they search. Cynddylig Cyfarwydd is finding the path. Eventually they get into a beautiful birch forest. These luminescent white trunks shining in the evening light. They go deeper and deeper into the forest, and then suddenly the forest is filled with the golden sound of a blackbird singing, and they stop and look up. And there, on a branch just above their heads, is the blackbird. Gurhir Gwalstad who can speak every language in the world, says to the blackbird, Blackbird, we are messengers from King Arthur, and this is what we ask. Please, can you tell us, do you know anything of Mabon or his mother Modron? And the blackbird looked down and sang. I am old. You have come to the right creature, he said. Let me tell you how old I am. When I first came here, an anvil had been placed at the bottom of this tree, and every evening before I roost and sleep, I wipe my beak twice on its side. And just by dint of doing that, wiping my beak on the anvil, I have worn it away to the nut-sized piece of metal you see at your feet. But in all that time, I have not heard of Mabon or his mother Modron, but luckily for you, I know an animal older than me. So follow me, and I will take you to the stag, Caru Rhydynfre. And away the bird flew. And the 4 of them raced after the bird until eventually they came to a new forest, a denser forest. Huge 100-branched oak trees spread themselves in every direction. There was no path. They just made their way through and between the trees, following Gurhir, who knew which way to go. Until eventually, suddenly, in front of them, they could see 2 of the biggest trees they'd ever seen. But as they got closer, they saw that these trees were not trees. In fact, these trees were antlers growing out of the head of the biggest creature they had ever seen. This was Caru Rhydynfre. Gurhir, who could speak every language, stepped forward, and he started to talk to the stag in a strange, strange voice, until eventually the stag looked down and said, You have done well to find me. I am truly a very old animal. Let me tell you how old. When I first came here, I was a young deer. These huge antlers on my head were little buds on the outside of my head. But in all the time I have been there, they have grown and grown and grown and grown. How long have I been here? Well, I remember when I was young, and my horns were little buds on the side of my head, I looked up and I saw an acorn fall down. It fell down, and later that year I saw that it had sprouted, and the next year it was a tiny little tree, and the next year it grew, and eventually it was taller than me, and eventually it was the tallest and strongest tree in the whole forest. And now I am so old. That tree that I saw grow, is that brown rotten stump that you see over there. But in all that time, I have not heard of Mabon or his mother Modron. So you will have to ask an animal older than I, and luckily I know which one it is. You must go and see. Tyllian Cwm Cawlwyd, the owl. So off they went, searching and searching, Cynddylig Cyfarwydd, taking them from the oak forest into a dense, dark yew forest. The dark, poisonous trees surrounded them so thickly you could hardly see the sky. So densely they could hardly see each other. They crept forwards, and then they had the feeling of being watched. They looked up, and a pair of huge round eyes stared down at them from a branch. It was the owl Tyllian Cwm Cawlwyd. And then Gwrhyr stepped forward and he said to the owl, "Owl, we have come from a long, long way. We are messengers from King Arthur. Please, do you know anything of Mabon or his mother Modron?" And the owl looked down and was impressed and said, "You have come to the right animal, for truly I am wise, for I am old. Let me tell you how old I am. When I first came to this valley, it looked just like this, yew trees growing everywhere. But then men came with their axes and they chopped down every single tree. But the forest replenished itself. It grew and it grew until it looked again exactly how you see it here. But then men came for a second time and they chopped down the trees, every single one, leaving just stumps behind. But in time, the forest regenerated, and the forest that you see around you now is the third growth of forest that I have seen since coming here. But in all that time, I have not heard of Mabon or his mother Modron. So you will have to ask an even older animal than me. You must go and see the eagle, Eryr Gwernabwy." So off they went to Gwernabwy. They climbed to the top of the mountain, and the wind whirled so that they thought they were going to be blown off the summit down to their deaths. But they hung on tight, and then the wind started to whirl around them, and it wasn't coming from any particular direction. And they looked up, and they saw a huge eagle coming to land a little distance away on top of a rock. They raced towards the eagle, and they bowed low, and they said, "Eryr Gwernabwy, do you know anything of Mabon or his mother Modron?" And the eagle looked down and said, "I sense that you are men of Arthur, so I will answer your question, but first I should tell you how old I am, so you know how wise I am. This rock I perch on now, this rock used to be so big, when I sat on top of it, I could peck at the stars. But just by dint of sitting on it, I have worn it away to this fist-sized piece of rock. But in all that time, I have to tell you, I have not heard of Mabon or his mother Modron, so I will tell you about the oldest animal of all. An animal I know well, an animal who was my enemy and is now my friend. It is the salmon, Eog Llyn Llwy. And in that lake by the side of the River Severn, she swims and she dives. And once I, said the eagle, was flying high in the sky, and I saw her silver flank sparkle in the sunlight, and I fell down, dropped like a stone. I reached out with my talons ready to grab hold of her. But once my talons were in her flesh, she started to swim, and she was stronger than me. She started to pull me under the water. And I said, as I was sinking down into the water, "If you drag me under the water, I will be stuck to your side. You will fall down to the bottom of the river with me. We will both die. Let us be friends. I can see that in your lips there are rows and rows of hooks. They have been there for many hundreds of years, some of them. That must cause you great pain. Release me. Come to the shore, and I will take those hooks from your lip." And that's what happened. That's what happened, said the eagle, and that's why I am the salmon's friend. And that's when I ask her, she may well do what you want. So follow me. The eagle spread its huge wings and flew. And the men followed the shadow of the eagle all the way towards the River Severn, and they followed it downstream, 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 almost to where it opens out into the Severn Sea. And there it curves round into a great lake, and there is the salmon. And they looked into the swirling depths of that muddy water, and they could sense something down, far down, down in the depths of that pool. And then suddenly the water parted, and out of it came a huge head, two huge unblinking eyes, a sparkling flank, the biggest salmon any of them had ever seen. And the voice that came from the pool itself, not from the creature, said, "I am Eog Llyn Lliw. I am the oldest animal alive. And when the river swells and it drives a wave upstream, the Severn Bore, then I can swim all the way to the place where the river bends. And there on its shore there's a castle called Caer Loyw, the Shining Fort. And when I swim up there, I can hear through its stone walls the saddest song I've ever heard, the saddest song that man or beast has ever heard. And that is the song you want to hear. Get on my back." Immediately, Kai and Bedwyr leapt onto the back of the fish, and the fish beat its tail against the swelling tide. And as the tide and the moon sucked the water up the Severn, a wave went backwards upstream, and that's the wave they rode all the way to the place where the Severn bends, and that's Caer Loyw. And through the walls of the Shining Fort, they heard a song, the saddest song that man or beast has ever heard. It was the song of Mabon. They broke their way in. They fought their way through. They got hold of Mabon, unchained him, grabbed him, took him out, and then he leapt on the back of the salmon. And the salmon turned and started to flow downstream. Downstream it went, Mabon on his back, Mabon singing a different song, Mabon singing a song of joy and freedom and hope. And if you have a title for that song, pop it in the chat now. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness, Michael, I was hanging on your every word. And in Ireland and in the Scottish country, that salmon is known as an Bradán Fasa, and that is the salmon of all knowledge. And she got her knowledge from eating 3 hazelnuts. And I feel such an urge to tell that story now. But there's been stories that have been living with us through this very special week. We had St. Patrick's Day. We had Seacht na Gaeilge, which is the week of our native language, of the Irish language. We had the World Storytelling Day yesterday, and it was all about new beginnings and how do new beginnings come. And when I was discussing this with the other Celtic women, with Kama and with Shona, we talked about the life, death, life cycle, about the Cailleach and the Selkie, about Coppelbawn na Mara, the white horses of the sea, and all these stories were lingering around us. But this story is a modern story in terms of those mythical stories, a truthful story. It was the 1800s in Ireland, and on Gorta Moor, the big hurt was biting at the shoulder of Éire of Ireland itself. Her people, who had been high kings of Ireland, who had sat through the golden age of Ireland, were now scrabbling in the ground for little bites to eat. Their bones rattled, and they could think of nothing but where they could next fill their bellies. In this time they had to make hard decisions, and one clan, the family O'Brien, they sat around their meagre fire in Ventry in the edge of Kerry, and they decided that in order that the family survive, that they would gather everything that belonged to them and give it to the young branch of the family, and that they would take it far across the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, to America, to the land of dreams. And there they would work hard and send home the little post with a few dollars in it to bring the next one out. Oh, it hurt the hearts of the Shandini, the old people. And when these people left, they called it the Little Death, because it was very rare that anyone would come back from the new lands. So the O'Brien family made their way up through the butter roads of Kerry and Cork, traversing some of the most beautiful landscape on the planet. The black granite rocks, the beautiful green grass verges, the trees of oak looking down on them, and their hearts were broken. Finally, they came to Cork City, and they slept under hedges, in open fields, anywhere at all that wouldn't cost them money, for every penny had to go with the young ones heading across the sea. When they finally came to Cove, and the ship that would be known as the coffin ship in times future, Mr. O'Brien could feel the sorrow and the rage, and it was like a great wave coming from the soles of his feet and rolling up through his body. He took his leave of the young family, and he walked up to the top of the headland so that he could look down and see the boat now like a little toy boat, and the people like tiny little people. He knew what they were murmuring to one another. "Look out for one another now. Bless yourselves every morning. Remember our stories. Bring our tunes with you. God bless. Send home the letters, and if you have any money, sew it into your vest so that it won't be taken." These were the words that were muttered between one and another as they left on the boat. Mr. O'Brien, looking out over it, went into his druidic heritage and started to call on the elements. On Mara, he said, the sea, the sea. Nos Nuguiha, ways of the wind. Spare, dia, spare, gods of the air, he called. And as if in answer, an Atlantic storm started to brew in the belly of Cove Harbour, the sky becoming grey and bruised purple, and the wind rising up. It became so loud, not to drown out Mr. O'Brien's words, you understand, but to receive them. And with his last breath, he roared into the wind. Gartheoch siad me, they hurt me. Maroig siad mo clan, they murder my family. Tor cowardom, cowrioclam, cowriocling. Help me, help my family, help our people. And with that, he fell into the waiting earth. The wind took those words and began to sing them in an Irish lilt that followed the boat across the Atlantic Ocean to new lands. When they got there, they found a grove of aspen trees, and the wind climbed up to the top of those trees and began to sing the words of Mr. O'Brien. La 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 la, la 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 la, she sang. And at the end of the tree, looking into his fire, Grandfather Choctaw heard that song. Gartheoch siad me, tor an cowerlum, Ta ochris an Darwin ring. The hunger of the world was in those words. Grandfather Choctaw looked into the fire, listening to the beautiful new sound playing in the aspen trees and not knowing where it came from. But as was his way, he took the wind's song into bed with him, and he listened for the shadowlands to open, where the ancestors dwelled, where all languages could be understood. And there he saw the misty face of Mr. O'Brien, his eyes rolled back in his head, his face gaunt, and in words that Grandfather Choctaw could understand, he breathed, "We are starving. Our bodies are starving. Our souls are hungry. But more than this, we starve for hope. Give us hope. Help us. Help us." And he went back into the mist from whence he came. Grandfather Choctaw woke up, dusted himself down, and called the tribe together. He told them everything that had happened in the shadow of Sleepland, and he said, "We need to help these people, these Irish people." His people looked at him, very disconcerted. "Grandfather Choctaw, that man on the horse, he's from a place in Ireland called Cork. He kicked grandmother in the shoulder, for she was not going fast enough. And that man marching up there with the big stick, he has scared our children into silence, and you say that we must help these people?" In reply, Grandfather Choctaw went to each one of the tribal members. He looked into each pair of eyes in turn, and he said this: "History is a long time. We are but a breath in the whole road of history. If we treat these people like they treat us, are we any different? Our inheritance is an elegance of spirit. If it is our gift to help a human or an animal, we are called to do this. Think on that." And as they walked the trail of tears, they thought on his words. They gathered together $170, a princely sum. They hired a ship and filled it with corn and sent it back across the Atlantic Ocean. It came into Cove in County Cork, where Mr. O'Brien had called to the wind. It was distributed from Middleton, a little town in Cork, all over the island of Ireland, where it still waves in the fields of Éire. We never forgot. And in the year 2020, a call went out on the internet from the Hopi tribe, from the Navajo tribe. "Our people are in trouble," it said. "Our elders live in long houses where they cannot isolate from COVID. The children need to live in those same spaces. There is no running water in these houses, and there is 4 shops for a territory as big as Ireland. Help us," they said. "Help us." And first, one little email came in. "We are on Clan Cana, the same family, the same tribe. Here's our little contribution." "Look at that, coming in from Ireland," they said. And it was followed by another little love note. "We have never forgotten your elegance of spirit. Here's my contribution." And then another little love note, and another little one, and a trickle became a river, became a sea of love love remembered. $4 million was raised, one for every life that had left these shores. Sometimes only a story will capture the spirit of that elegance of spirit. This year, the theme of the World Storytelling Day is New Beginnings. May we all be on Clan Ceanna, the same tribe.
Uriat Messiah Langen High. Uriat Messiah Langen High. Uriat Messiah Langen High. Elan Maralfa Tavochai. He was alone. He was lonely and he was alone. He lived alone on a little island. He ate alone on a little island in a little hut. He slept alone. He was lonely and he wanted a wife. He wanted a family. He wanted a wife. He'd fish alone every day and he'd walk around his island all alone, total isolation. And one day, the first beautiful day of the year, as he pulled his boat onto shore and he looked across to the big rocks, he saw a fire dancing. He hid and he watched. Women, naked, moving around the fire. These were the Selkie people. These were the people who come from the sea, the seals. They come on the shore and they take off their skin and they become women, beautiful women, and I can have one. If I take their skin, they can't return to the sea. They can be mine. And he watched for a long time. And sure enough, just above him, just in reach, was one of these skins, these Selkie skins. And he took his chance and he took one. And one of the women, she stopped dancing. She turned to him and she ran. And he ran back to the shore, back to his hut. He shut himself in with the skin and he looked for somewhere to put it. And in the rafters of the house, he hid it. And he waited until, let me in! I can't go home without my skin. Let me in, please, let me in. Let me in, I can't go home without my skin, let me in. And all night she banged on the door. And all night she screamed to him, let me in. And it wasn't until the morning that he let her in. And he made some porridge. And the next day, Huriat Messiah Langen Rai. Huriat Messiah Langen Rai. Huriat Messiah Langen Rai. Elan Marafat Avochai. and she ate. And after 1 month, she stopped crying. And after 3 months, she smiled once. And after a year, 2 years. 3 years. 4 years. The child was full of life. She ran and she jumped and she sang and she played and she climbed. And she climbed, and one day she climbed right up the wall and into the attic space where she pulled down. Mommy, what's this? What's this? And she had her skin in one hand and her child in the other. She had her skin in one hand and her child in the other. And the woman, she ran to the shore. She ran right in and she put on her skin and she dove into the waves. And the man saw a seal come straight up, look him straight in the eye, and then disappeared forever. And the girl, the little girl, so full of life, she was loved. But she never saw her mother again. She did receive presents every year on her birthday, the most beautiful pearls and shells. And she remembered the song. Uriad Mashaya Langenrai. Uriad Mashaya Langenrai. Uriad Mashaya Langenrai. Elad Marafat Vohai. We were talking a lot this week about the stories that seem to be calling us, and I've been thinking a lot about what people take from young women. And I think that story is really important for that. And today when I was rehearsing it, I saw a seal in the bay, and so I thought, this is the one I have to tell. But it's important to say that these stories that were told in the rural, very, very isolated parts of Scotland happened when women weren't able to travel to see their families. But in the summer months, when they could dance. They could dance together. And those dances, they all involve flying. That's why we spin so fast, so you feel like you're flying. So in the winter and the spring, we have these stories. And in the summer, we have the feeling of flying. So there is hope after the March time that we'll fly together soon. Thank you.
Dagwr wen wigan heno, Turumpty radl didal. Galw gan isi dras ercho, Turumpty radl didal. Mi hosa vanich is God, Nesta Maria dina farfo, Faldi raldi diddle down. Baldy raldy diddle down, Turumpty raddle dee down. The shoots of broom and oak and meadowsweet pushed their way up through the soft spring warm earth. They twisted and they twined, and very slowly but surely They twisted themselves into the form of a woman, Blodeuwedd. Now, this was the work of Gwydion and Math, and on this night, Gwydion and Math stand over their flower creation and they pour incantations over her like oil. And as the sun rises in the sky that morning and it pours down onto Blodeuwedd, she takes her first breath. And it's almost as though, as she takes that first breath, she steals the breath from Gwydion and Math, because she is more beautiful than they had possibly imagined. Her breath, her skin, her lips, as sweet as nectar. The two magicians have conjured a wife for Lle Llaw Goffes, so named for the soft blonde curls on the top of his head. Now, I think it's important that you know where Lle Llaw Goffes came from. The egg that made Lle Llaw Goffes was pinched, filched, stolen, tricked from the womb of Arianrhod by Gwydion. Gwydion, who was a great magician, but he was also a mass slaughterer and a rapist. And he scooped up this egg. He scooped up this egg before anybody could notice, and he wrapped it up in silk, and he placed that silk bundle into a small chest, and he placed that chest at the bottom of his bed, and I think he whispered incantations over that chest, and I think he made that egg turn into a child. When Arianrhod found out what Gwydion had done, she was furious, she was spitting. Now, she could have struck that child dead, she could have, but she didn't. You have made this child, Gwydion, so you may keep him, you may love him, you may do as you want with him, but I want nothing to do with him. And this forced nature stops here, Gwydion. And with that, Arianrhod placed a curse on the child. She placed a curse on the child that he would never marry a woman that was human born. And so here we are in the woods, Blodeuwedd taking her first breath, and the dew had barely dried from her petal-soft skin before she found herself wrapped in the marital bed of Lle Llaw Goffes, the spirit of Gwydion breathing over them, whispering to Lle, goading him to tease open those petals that were not yet ready to be opened. Now, Blodeuwedd, she did her best to love Lle Llaw Goffes. Oh, she did, she tried. She tried so hard. But love, like nature, cannot be forced. One day, Lle was sent to the north, to Caerdathil. And it just so happened that on this day, a great stag ran onto the grounds as Blodeuwedd was out walking, and this stag, it was pursued by a handsome huntsman, Gronw Pebir. And as soon as Gronw Pebir looked on Blodeuwedd, there was not a part of him that did not love her. And the same was true for Blodeuwedd. For her, he was like the sun, and when that sun shone onto her, like the sun shines onto a flower, she opened. Perfectly right, perfectly natural. For 3 days and 3 nights, Blodeuwedd and Gronw Pebir were wrapped in one another's arms. And by the end of the 3rd night, there was no part of either of their hearts that did not belong to one another. Eventually, Gronw had to leave. Lle came home. How Blodeuwedd wanted to marry Gronu Pebir, but she couldn't. The only way that could ever happen was if Clay was to die. Now, Clay was a work of magic, the son of a goddess. The only way, well, he couldn't die. There was no way that he could die, or so it was thought. And then very slowly, a little thought began to trickle into Blodeuwedd mind. What if? Lleithel Goffus and Blodeuwedd, they were in bed. Blodeuwedd was tossing and turning. What is the matter, said Clay. I had a nightmare, said Blodeuwedd. I dreamt that you died. Clay just laughed. Don't worry, Blodeuwedd, there is no way that I can die. Are you sure? Is there no way at all? Well, it is very hard to kill me, said Clay. Well, tell me, said Blodeuwedd. Tell me how you might die, so that I might prevent it from ever happening. I can only be killed, said Clay, with a spear that has been carved over a year, but only on Sundays when people are at Mass. Well, said Blodeuwedd, that's unlikely, but it's not impossible. It's more difficult than that, said Clay. I cannot be killed outside. I cannot be killed inside. I cannot be killed on a horse. I cannot be killed on foot. Thank you, said Blodeuwedd. I feel a little better now. That first Sunday, Blodeuwedd set to work carving that spear. And over the next year, this riddle, it muddled and played in her mind. And by the end of the year, she had it. She'd cracked it. She knew what to do. Clay and Blodeuwedd are walking along the river. It's Clay's birthday. I have arranged a gift for you, said Blodeuwedd. And as they rounded the corner of the river, there in front of him was a bathtub full of hot steaming water and rich oils. A bath by the river for you, Clay. Over the top of this bath, there was a thick thatched roof with no walls, just in case it rains, said Blodeuwedd. Clay climbed down into the water. He washed himself, and he was just about to get out when Blodeuwedd appeared. Look what I found, she said. A goat. She had a rope. At the end of the rope, there was a goat, a billy goat. I've had this great idea. You are so good at balancing, Clay. How do you think you would be at balancing on this goat? Oh, go on, she said. It would make me laugh so much. And it was a little bit weird, to be honest, but Clay agreed because she seemed so keen on the idea. So Clay, he's just climbing out of this bathtub. And there's the goat. And he's just stepping onto the goat. And he's just about to straighten up and step his other foot onto the goat when his eyes lock with Gronu Pebir. Gronu Pebir leaps up from his hiding place. He pulls the spear behind him. He fires it. But Gronu had never been a very good shot. The spear misses. It digs into Clay's side. Clay shrieks with agony, and immediately he's transformed into an eagle. He goes flying up into the sky, this great spear hanging from him, blood pouring down. The sky goes black. Now, in Wales at this time, not very much could happen without the wind catching hold of it and carrying it to Math, the great magician. When Math heard of Blodeuwedd's scheme, he was furious, he was spitting. He sent Gwydion straight away to go and find Clay, wherever he might be. And he searched the whole of North Wales and Powys until eventually Gwydion found Clay at the top of an oak tree. A horrible wreck of a bird. Guts and maggots falling down from him. He beckoned him down. He touched him with his magic rod. Immediately, Clay was transformed. He was skin and bones. Over the next few months, he nursed Clay back to health. And once that was done, he turned his head to revenge Blodeuwedd. He hunted her down. She saw him coming. She ran to the mountains. Her maids went with her. They stood around her. They tried to hold Gwydion back. He drove them up onto the mountain, up to a lake. There was nowhere to turn. He drove them into the water. The maids could not swim. The maids drowned. And then he cursed Blodeuwedd, or so he thought. He touched her with a curse, and immediately she felt her arms stretching out. She looked out, and they had transformed into wings. She felt herself shrinking smaller, smaller, smaller. She felt her face stretching into a beak. Gwydion had transformed Blodeuwedd into an owl. A curse, he thought, never to see the light of day, always to be mocked by all of the other birds. But little did he know he gave her a blessing. Little did he know that was the way things were supposed to go. Blodeuwedd had budded. She had blossomed, and now was the time for her long and endless night. As an owl with her great big eyes, she could see everything. And I like to imagine Blodeuwedd, which is Welsh for owl. I like to imagine Blodeuwedd circling over the land. I like to imagine her circling over my house. I imagine her circling above my bed. And then just before the sun comes up, she travels to the north. She travels to Caer Arianrhod, to Arianrhod, the great goddess's castle. And she flies into those rafters and she perches on that great silver wheel as Arianrhod sings her lullabies, and she drifts off into a deep, deep sleep. Val-de-ral-de diddle-val, val-de-ral-de-diddle-val, to-rumpty-row, rumpty-raddle-diddle-dal. Lovely. Thank you, everybody. We are going to take a 10-minute break now.
Croeso i bawb. Hello, everybody. Well, I came and joined you at midwinter, and I was going to tell you one extra story, but because we ran out of time, as always, so I said I'd come back and do it this time. It's a spring story. It starts on the spring equinox. It's a very short story, and it's with my my trusty cranky box here. Just very briefly, it's part of a major project that's going on at the moment, which some of you may know about, some probably won't. It's called Ports Past and Present, and it's a big project involving lots of artists, academics, a couple of storytellers, a whole gang of creative people who are putting together the various histories, stories, folklore of what was the land between the west coast of Wales and the east coast of Ireland. And one of the things I've been looking at is just looking at the shared, not the shared stories, but the shared characters within the stories. And this comes from one of those. One spring evening, a swan, a daughter of the children of Lear, flew across the Irish Sea and approached the craggy coast of Gower in the south of Wales. As she landed, she removed her wings and feathers. She felt the soft air on her skin, and she swam in the sea, free as a bird. And when she came out of the sea, she felt the soft air on her skin, and she gave thanks to those who had given her such a present at spring. But there's always a but. She was being watched by a man, a farmer who lived in a cottage on the hill, and he saw this beautiful woman. And of course, farmers who see beautiful women bathing in the sea, well, of course, he fell in love, and he took hold of her wings and feathers. She came out of the sea and she asked him to return her clothes, but he refused. And he said, no, he'd fallen in love with her. And she said, well, you can't have fallen in love with me. You don't even know me. You've never spoken to me before. You're infatuated, that's all. But no, he wouldn't listen. And he kept her wings and feathers. And she followed him back to his home, where he locked her clothes in a chest by the side of his cottage. And she waited. And he gave her presents. He gave her a pretty dress, but it scratched her soft skin. He sat her by the fire, but she was a creature of the sea and the air, and she spent her time sitting in the great iron bath, filled with seawater and salt. And every evening she stared out of the window as she watched her sisters, the daughters of the children of Leah, flying past the moon. And every evening the young man went to the chest and he unlocked it and he took out the wings and feathers and he held them carefully to his cheek. And then he locked the chest again. But of course, one evening in late spring, he forgot to lock the chest. She took her clothes, she dressed in her wings and feathers, she flapped her arms, but she hadn't flown for so long. Her arms were like string, but she flapped and she flapped and she ran and she ran and she took off into the air and she flew away. And some say she is still flying. In that land between Ireland and Wales, you will see her still forever flying. And the young man, for his cruelty in trying to keep somebody against their will, is crying. And it's said that his tears will fill the land between Wales and Ireland forever.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous, Peter. Thank you so much. And if you don't know Peter's work, you can see what an incredible illustrator he is, but he's got a range of gorgeous books. So I hugely recommend that you look them up. He's done such wonderful work in West Wales, collecting and developing and maintaining and reimagining the stories from West Wales. So please, I implore you to have a look at those. Thank you, Peter. That was wonderful. Thank you. And next we've got Semele. Wonderful Semele is going to sing us a great song, I believe.
Yes, I have a song. I just want to say before I do though, Karma, Shona, Maria, thank you so much for doing these events. They have been a ray of sunshine in my lockdown life. Thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful and lovely to see Karma again, who's an old friend. So yes, this is the spring equinox, the time of balance between dark and light, masculine and feminine, and the goddess, the triple goddess, is in her maiden aspect. So this is kind of a story song, but it's about the maiden goddess. Mervyn was playing his pipes in the wood, and it sounded so good to my feeling. Heary, hearoo, played the dance in my blood, and my fresh maidenhood started reeling. Sweetly it drew me, the sound that went through me, as if sure it knew me. A maiden song, laughing long, I'm sure that I hear it. Oh, let me draw near it. I want to be merrily courted in spring. Round us the trees formed a wheel in my mind, as if all womankind were careering. Softly he touched me, our hands intertwined, and we gently reclined in the clearing. Sweetly it drew me, the sound that went through me, as if sure it knew me, a maiden song laughing long. I'm sure that I hear it, oh let me draw near it. I want to be merrily courted in spring. Dewfall to starfall, he made love to me in a manner so free and revealing. Swift-footed, light-footed, goat-footed, he played a sweet melody with such meaning. Sweetly it drew me, the sound that went through me, as if sure it knew me, a maiden song laughing long. I'm sure that I hear it, oh let me draw near it. I want to be merrily courted in spring. Daybreak and I wake to spring's sweet bouquet, and a glorious day of beginning. Mervyn has gone on his magical way, but the equinox day leaves me spinning. Sweetly it drew me, the song that went through me, as if sure it knew me, a maiden song laughing long. I'm sure that I hear it, oh let me draw near it. I want to be merrily courted in spring.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much, Semele. How perfect and gorgeous and wonderful. Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. Lovely. Thank you for your wonderful contribution. Fabulous. And next we've got another old friend of mine is Jo Munton, who I've known for a long time as a puppeteer, and as I say, she's just started storytelling in I think she also did the Michael Harvey course, so everybody should go and do the Michael Harvey course. But yeah, great. Are you there, Jo?
Great. Well, I was just going to tell you some snippets of some tales that I was told, and particularly I really wanted to do this today because I was told them nearly 9 years ago to this very day. So 9 years ago to this very day, I landed in Hantimanzisk. Wonder if many people know where Hantimanzisk is. Hantimanzisk, deepest, darkest Siberia. So I was working with an amazing puppet company, Clogless Lobster. And we landed, and this is one of the 7 hills of Hantimanzisk. Forgive me my props, I am a puppeteer at heart. So we landed in Hantimanzisk, and there we were telling stories of the sea, which was remarkable because we were in one of the places that was most furthest away from the sea. But that's another story. The stories I want to tell you today, the snippet of a story I want to tell you today was told to me in Turama by a very special lady, a shaman from the Hare tribe. Come closer, and I will tell you a tale that I've been told. Come closer, and I will tell you a secret if you promise to share. Well, she told us many secrets. One, that there are 5 types of people in this world. There are the bear people. There are the hare people. There are the reindeer people. and there are the wolf people. And there is the swan people. And this is the story of the swan goddess. Now, the swan goddess was on a very important mission, but that is another story. She was on a very important mission, so she left her lonely lake and took off over the plains of Siberia. But as she went over the hills of Khanty-Mansisk, she dropped her two most precious things. As you know, she was on a very important mission. She couldn't stop, so she called for her most ferocious protector. Now, who could be her most ferocious protector out here on the plains of Siberia? This is your time to get a bit interactive. Unmute yourself and tell me, who was her most ferocious protector?
Who was the most ferocious protector?
Bear.
The sun.
Bear. Could it be a bear? Could be a bear. It wasn't a bear. No, not a bear. Bear,
Snow.
bear.
Siberian tiger.
It's a tiger. Yeah, no, not the Siberian tiger.
Wolf.
Not the eagle. Not the wolf. Definitely not the wolf.
Giant.
Whoa, now we're going exactly in the opposite direction. It was.
An otter.
The mosquito. Oh yes, the mosquito, the most ferocious protector. And I tell you, for centuries, her two most precious things were safe. I'm going to skip over a whole load of the stories because that would take time, and I'll come to the until at the end. Until they fumigated the forests, they killed the ferocious protector, and they found the two most precious things, oil and gold. Now, this is a true story. These were tales I was told to tell, and that is the end of my little story for today. Thank you.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Jo. Thank you so much. That was great. Yeah, and so lovely to kind of have that visual, physical thing going on as well. Thank you so much. Wonderful. And I hope to hear lots more stories from you in months and years to come. Thank you. Next up, we've got Colin Regan. Are you there?
Yes, hello.
Fabulous. Oh, thank you, Colin. Yeah, wonderful contribution last time, and I've been keeping up to date with all of your wonderful music. So yeah, we're blessed to have you. So thank you, Colin. Over to you.
Just I went to Michael's storytelling thing in Bledfell as well many years ago. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely it helped me a lot with I'm not a teller, but I write stories, so it helped me a lot with that. And Michael's awesome, so it was wonderful to hear. Okay, will I do a song for you?
Lovely, thanks, Colin.
Okay. This is a song associated with the springtime. One morning as I went a fowling, bright Phoebus adorned the plain. It was down by the shores of Loch Erin I met with this wonderful dame. Her voice was so sweet and so pleasing, such beautiful notes she did sing. that the innocent fowl of the forest their love unto her they did bring. Now it being the first time I met her, my heart it did leap with surprise. For I thought that she could be no mortal, but an angel falling from the sky. Her hair it resembled gold tresses, her skin was as white as the snow, and her lips were as red as the roses that bloom around Loch Erin's shore. When I heard that my love was eloping, these words unto her I did say. Let me take you to my habitation, for Cupid has led me astray. No longer I'll keep the commandments, so they say that it is the best plan. For a lady who yields to men's pleasures, the scriptures do say they are wrong. Oh, my darling, don't accuse me of weakness. All treachery I do disown. I would make thee a lady of honor if with me tonight you'll come home. Oh, had I the lamp of great Aladdin, his rings and his genie, what's more, I would part with them all for to win you and to live upon Loch Erin's shore.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gillen. That was so gorgeous. Thank you so much. Mwah. Really lovely. And I look forward to, again, also just hearing much more of your music over the next years. And I hope before long, all of us can come together and we can all have some real events together and listen to some music and some stories and have a big festival together. That's what I hope. Fabulous. Thank you so much. And next we're on to Rick, who is, again, a friend of mine and a great actor, and I'm really looking forward to hearing him telling a story. Thank you, Rick. Over to you.
So, yeah, this is a story, a local story from Mid Wales, which is how a particular place, which probably a lot of Mid Walians will be familiar with, how it got its name. It began 1,000 years ago in the heart of Wales, at a place now famous for its dramatic mountainous beauty. But when the story happened, it was a hard and bitter place for people to earn a living. And Margaret, who was a widow, lived on the south bank of the fast-flowing Avon Mynach. For company, she kept a little dog, and to earn a living, she kept a cow. And each morning, as the sun crept over the mountain, she would get from her bread and milk her cow. And each afternoon, she would push a heavy barrow full of butter and cheese to the village of Ponterwyd, where she would sell her produce at the crossroads. Now, it was far too dangerous for her to cross the river near her house, the ravine being far too steep and the current treacherous. So Margaret was forced to push her cart along the bank of the river for several miles until it was shallow enough and calm enough for her to cross. And then each evening, as the sun set in the west, she would trudge the long journey home, dragging the heavy cart behind her. Oh, my bones ache, and my legs are so stiff. If only there were a bridge, it would save me hours of walking, she cried as she fell into her bed and drifted off into a deep and troubled sleep. so she did not hear the rain and the wind lashing on her roof. She did not see the lightning crashing across the sky, and she did not hear the thunder exploding as a mighty storm raged through the night. Next morning, Margaret woke and dressed. The dog, eager to start the day, fussed around her feet. She opened the door to the byre and called, "I'm here, Marlon," for that was the cow's name. "It's time for you to give milk." Margaret peered into the gloom, but her precious cow was gone. The old woman ran outside, desperate. The dog followed, excited, barking. "Marlon? Where are you, Marlon?" Then she saw her cow on the far bank of the river. And the river was storm busy. She had never seen it so bad. And next to the cow was a man in a monk's habit. A hood covered his head. "Is this your cow?" yelled the man. His voice was strangely powerful. It was louder than the thundering river. The old woman called back, but her voice was blown away in the wind and the noise. So she nodded reply. "Well, she must have been frightened in the night and wandered off. You will have to walk many miles upstream if you want to collect her." Oh, if only there were a bridge here. I could save myself miles every day. "Margaret, I shall build you a bridge by noon." A bridge by noon? That would indeed be a miracle, but I can't pay you back. I have no money. Laughed the monk. "Money means nothing to me. All I want in return is the soul of the first living thing to cross the river." And at that moment, there was nothing in the world that Margaret wanted more than a bridge, and so she agreed to the contract. "Well, go into your house and wait. And when I've finished the bridge, I will call you." So Margaret grabbed the little dog, went into the house and shut the door. And then the most almighty noise occurred. Huge rocks being cut and split, mighty trees cut down and sawn into logs, great chains clanking with heavy loads being dragged across the mountainside, and all the time great shouts as the monk toiled to build the bridge. Well, time passed and Margaret got hungry. And so she grabbed some cheese and bread from her cupboard and started to eat. And just at that moment, the noise outside stopped. "The bridge is ready," the monk shouted. Margaret was out of that room in a flash. She was so excited. And she saw across the river her cow and the monk. And there was a bridge. She could not believe her eyes. It was huge, and it had a stone arch that spanned across the whole ravine. Just then, the monk said, "Come across and inspect your new bridge." Just as she was about to walk across the bridge, she remembered what the monk required for his work, the soul of the first living thing to cross the bridge. She stopped. Your cow needs milking. You must come over and collect it. How can I be sure the bridge will take my weight? Called Margit. Come, Margit. You can see how strong the bridge is. But the river runs so fast, I might fall in and drown. Trust me, you will be quite safe. But she didn't trust him. She called a dog. The dog was at her side. She took her bread and her cheese and she threw it across the river. The dog ran like the wind, gobbled up the food, and the monk stopped. He was livid. He shouted. He grew red in the face. His cowl dropped to reveal 2 dark horns. Margit had dealt with the devil. I'm an old woman, but I'm not an old fool. Our deal is done, so be on your way, Satan, and take your dog's soul with you. The soul of a dog is no good to me. You have tricked me. You can keep it. But I won't forget this. And he vanished. And the old woman lived with her dog and the cow for many years. And people came from all over to see this fine bridge over Avon Mynach. The devil was far too embarrassed to return to Wales, but the bridge he has built in one morning stands to this day. Some people say you can make out the devil's face in the bank below the bridge. Have a good look next time you visit Devil's Bridge.
Yay, wonderful, Rick. Wow, you've done some amazing work on that story. I kind of know it, but it's just brought that whole story to a completely new light. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you, Dharma.
Yay. And next we've got Mog. Now, I think I first heard Mog singing a song around a bonfire on a beach about, I don't know how long.
Yes.
Probably 20 years ago.
Yes.
And I just remember my jaw.
That's right. That's exactly.
Yeah, you're just a wonderful.
Oh.
You'll hear for yourself. I won't tell you how great she is because you'll hear for yourself now. But yeah, I believe you've got a new spring album coming out, and is that you're going to sing a song from that? Is that what you're going to do?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah. Don't build up any expectation, please.
Sure, it'll be wonderful. I know it will.
Anyway, thanks. Yeah. I'm just going to sing a song that I released on Spring Equinox, which was yesterday, wasn't it? And it's called The Farfarers, and it's a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson. Actually sounds a little bit more summery, but I just wanted to get it out because I really like it. It's quite bouncy, a bit like spring. So hope you enjoy it. Can you hear that okay? Broad sun, bright white sails on the blue
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Ah,
That was gorgeous.
thanks.
Absolutely gorgeous, as I
You
know.
have to imagine it. You have to imagine it with melodica and some wooden flute, or no, a little tin whistle with it. Okay.
Will you put a link up to your website in the chat, because I feel
Oh
like
yeah, sure.
we've been following these seasons, and I noticed that you've got like autumn, winter, spring. Have you got summer as well, Alba?
No, that's next. That'll
That's
be next year. Yeah.
So I implore you to look. So please do put that in the chat for us.
Okay, I will do. Thanks for asking. It's lovely.
Thank you. Thanks, Maud.
Oh, take
Wonderful.
care.
And thank you. And then our final contribution for this evening is Anna, who I think told in 2 sessions ago, she told a story for the first time on Zoom. And now she's going to tell us another story. Wonderful storyteller. Thank you, Anna. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. I'll pass over to you. Thank you, Anna.
Okay. And it's a short story. Late summer, a warm, sunny afternoon. 2 seeds drop and fall to the warm ground. And they would have lay there happily for a long time. But the autumn rains came and turned the soil to mud, and a passing sheep trod into the earth, and the seeds were sent down, and there they lay, side by side, in the warm soil for a long time. And they were comfortable, and they turned to one another and said, "Aren't we lucky? We've got such a nice warm bed. Things have turned out okay for us." And the rains came and the water filtered down into the soil, but it was warm and moist. And they enjoyed their sleep, and they enjoyed lying there in the dark. And gradually it turned colder, and sometimes the soil seemed to go so hard and rigid, they shook in their bed. In fact, they shook so much they could feel their sides cracking, and they didn't know how to keep warm. But then one day, or it might have been night, for it's very difficult to tell the difference when you're under the ground. But it felt like somebody had put a lovely warm blanket over them. They could feel the weight, and they snuggled down and they slept most contentedly. And they would have laid there for a long, long time enjoying their sleep. But one day, or it could have been night, because it's very difficult to tell the difference when you're under the ground, somebody or something must have whipped away that blanket, because they felt the weight shift off them, and they felt, this wasn't like the rain they felt before. This was soft rain. This was warm rain. And as it came down, it brought a kind of an energy that woke them up. And one seed said to the other seed, "Oh, wow, don't you want to go and explore and find out what's in the ground below us and what's up above? Don't you want to go and explore?" And the other seed said, "No. Why would I want to go anywhere? I'm perfectly happy here. I'm warm and content and comfortable. Oh, I don't know what might be in the world up there or down below, and I've no intention of finding out. It could be frightening. It could be uncomfortable." But the other seed was longing to find out, and it longed so hard that it sent down a root, a huge taproot that went down into the soil and discovered that, hey, they weren't alone down there. In the soil, there were other creatures that lived down there. There were worms, lots of different kinds, flabby ones, little red ones, little orange ones that seemed to move sideways. There were earwigs, and there were millipedes and centipedes and ants, and millions and billions of creatures that didn't even have names. There were so many of them. And then this root decided, hey, I want to explore sideways. And it sent out lateral roots and discovered that, wow, there were roots of other plants. And they intermingled and they intertwined and they grew quite friendly down there in the underground. And the shoot that went upwards to try and explore what was above them went up and pushed up until it burst out into a world that was, wow, bright and full of colours and warm spring sunshine. Oh, and the shoots went out sideways and luxuriated, and the leaves unfurled and stretched into that glorious spring sunshine. And above them, there was a colour blue, and white clouds, and rainbows, and coloured butterflies, and birds. And the sounds, the birds singing in the morning, the song thrush, and late at night, the blackbird. And sounds of the sparrows flying overhead, and could hear their wings rustling, and the buzzing of insects. One day, a ladybird came and landed on its leaf, and it could feel its feet tickling its leaves, and it crept underneath to shelter from the rain and decided it was such a nice place. It was actually going to have its babies there and left its larvae underneath the leaf of the plant. I felt so honoured. But best of all was when a great fat bumblebee came and went straight into the flower and tickled it until it gave up its nectar and went off with masses of pollen clinging to its legs. Oh, the plant loved it. It grew strong and big and loved being in the meadow with all the other flowers. And spring turned to summer, And in the late summer, strange little creatures came out of the ground. Their legs looked too long and skinny to stand on and walk, and their wings looked too long and spindly and straggly for flying, but somehow they crept over the grass, and they were crane fly, walking, trying to walk in amongst the blades of grass, and indeed it looked like the blades of grass could cut them. They were so spindly. And crane fly are the favourite food of starlings. And after the crane fly, along came the starlings, and the starlings swooped down and gobbled them up. One starling in particular went down to see if there were any tasty larvae. But no. In the ground, all it found was a seed, which it gobbled up without even saying thank you, and it flew off. And the plant dropped 2 little seeds onto the warm ground. And that's the end.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. That was so gorgeous. That kind of journey that we went on through the seasons. Really lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Sorry.
Thank everybody for such a wonderful evening. It's been great.
Yay. Well, yes, and that brings me to thank you. Thank you to Shona and Maria, wonderful friends and collaborators on this project. It's been a real blessing. And thank you to Michael, and thank you to all of you. Wonderful. I feel so blessed to have all these gorgeous contributions from all this kind of network of my local, my friends and people that I know from the local area, particularly this evening. So thank you so much. I do feel blessed. And to close the evening, our wonderful Shona is going to sing us a final song before you leave. Thank you.
Yeah, just a little one. Of all the money that ever I spent it in good company. And all the harm that ever I've done, alas, it was to none but me. For all I lack, for want of wit, to memory now I can recall. So fill for me a parting glass. Good night, and joy be with you all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Lovely.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Karma. And
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you, Karma.
Thank
And
you so much.
everybody.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody. Thanks for a beautiful night.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Karma.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you all. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Sleep well.
Fabulous. And with that, I think we'll close the evening. Thank you so much.
Bye, Karma.